listening to the musicmarketing.com podcast. How to sell more music, get more people to your shows, and make more money in the music business. Here's your host, music marketer, and author of the book Six Figure Musician, David Hooper. Joining David is his co-host, Wendy Wallace.
This is the musicmarketing.com podcast, episode number 4. I'm David Hooper from Nashville, Tennessee, and with me, my co-host, Wendy Wallace from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Wendy, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Great. Glad to be back. And this is an exciting episode for me. A couple of episodes ago, episode number 2, I used your music journalism skills to go out and do an interview. And that's the great thing about this podcast. We get to interview people that we might not get to interview on the radio show that I do, the broadcast radio show, but they still have great stories. And today, no exception. I met a guy a couple of weeks ago. I was doing a live event here in Nashville. His name is Denny Sarokin. And he's a songwriter, like a lot of people here in Nashville. And he told me he had a song on hold for 18 years. Pretty hard to believe. On hold, if you don't know, it's when a music publisher has a song that somebody wants to cut, but they're maybe not ready to cut it, or they want to kind of, look at a few songs. Maybe they're not sure about it, but on hold is pretty good because it's a good chance that it will get cut if they like it. And he had a song that was on hold, and it kept being delayed, and they still liked it, kept being delayed, and eventually 18 years later it was released. And it was with a band called Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. People will remember that name. I'm sure that's one of the biggest outfits of the 60s and 70s, folk music legend. And Graham Nash was the guy that really liked the song. But not a young band, not a band that's out there just constantly putting out records. They're constantly, it seems like, and help me out here, Wendy. Would you say that they break up, they get back together, Neil Young comes along, he's in, they kick him out, get him back in. They've got a lot of strife, so you can see why working with a band like that, it would take a little while to get cut.
Well, just for the record, I think from when I did the research, it's not necessarily they kicked Neil Young out. It's more like he decided to just leave and go do his own thing. But yeah, but the gist of it was that kind of unpredictable in terms of what was going on with their side projects, what was going on in their personal life, that kind of thing. So I can't personally imagine waiting around. Well, not that Denny was waiting around. I mean, he had a career. He was doing other things. But I can't imagine that initial excitement of having someone someone who Denny considers to be musical heroes, to show interest in a song and then go, 18 years of the ups and the downs. And he'll talk about that. You guys will hear him talk about what happened over the 18 years and, come so close and then not hear anything for a few years. It would just, I don't know, either you get to a place of where it just completely wears you down, or you just kind of get to a place where you feel kind of neutral about things and don't have any, attachments to, or you let go of your attachment to an outcome, I guess you could say.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you interview him, because we talk about this in the book, Six Figure Musician, Life of a Song. And sometimes that's that you do a song and it'll get cut years later, and it'll get cut years later and cut years later, and several different artists cut it and several different people have hits. But sometimes it's that you write it, somebody's interested, they're not interested. Then somebody else is interested. But talking to writers, and I talk to a lot of them because I'm here in Nashville, literally the songwriting capital of the world. You see that what Denny has experienced is not that uncommon, that you'll have somebody show interest, and sometimes it's just timing. And I think Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young is a perfect example of a band where, you're on their time, and they've got other things going on. They're not necessarily anxious to release new music, maybe like a younger band would, and they've got a following, and they've got their solo careers, they've got other things going on in their life at this point. So, perfect example of life of a song, and sometimes it works out in your favor, sometimes it doesn't, but it's one of those things that I think makes the music industry very exciting. So I'm excited to hear this. And the song is called Sanibel. It's about an island off of Florida. Is that correct,
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes, it is.
So it's a nice place, and it's called Sanibel. There's a little bit more to the story that, Wendy, I know you're going to dive into here. And let's play a clip, and I'll let you get to it, and I'll be back when you're done.
sea of light on its way to me tonight from a distant shore, taking me home once more. And the waves and the whistle of the wind make me come alive again. My destiny at my door. Gonna leave this town forever and go where I never need an overcoat no more. Where they cry, ooh la la la, every night, every day, sitting by the Gulf Coast, just 1,000 miles away. They cry, ooh la la la, on and I will dwell. Starlit nights in paradise on the Isle of Sanibel.
So when I was checking out your website, there was something that you wrote that really caught my eye that I wanted to quote back to you. You wrote, "I've always believed Joan of Arc was burned at the stake for doing what songwriters do for a living. Some inner voice guides the song ether into the material world." So can you talk to me about your songwriting experiences pre-1981 when you sat down to write Sanibel, and how it is that you came to be experienced enough and skilled enough as a songwriter to be comfortable enough to listen to that inner voice?
Okay, well, let me preface this by saying there's sort of two generic categories of songwriters or ways of writing songs. And people are sometimes inclined to one or the other, but they're not exclusive of each other. You know, there's like the Nashville kind of formula, like, okay, this is our golf appointment. You know, you're my 10 o'clock, and we come in, we have 3 hours, and there's one or two writers in the room, and the publishers throw everybody into the lion's den, and you're supposed to come out with a song. And people come in with, oh, I jot down titles all the time. Or wait a minute, Wendy said something to me on the phone. Let me write that down. That would make a good title. So, you know, there's a very technical or architectural kind of approach to it. You know, you have your blueprints, you plot things out, and then you fill in the details and you write. Then there's, you know, what I kind of call the muse method, which is just like, to me, basically the songs. I think my best songs, and the majority of them, just sort of come to me. You know, I'm not one of these get up in the 8 in the morning with a cup of coffee and begin writing. You know, they come when I'm walking, when I'm not thinking. They come as a whiplash to some emotional thing, for better or worse, that you've gone, or something you see on TV that sort of politically or intellectually, you know, motivates me or stimulates me or angers me. There's basically, for me, a lot of songs just pop into my head. And the Joan of Arc analogy is basically, you know, she didn't want to save France. She didn't want to play soldier. She just sort of like got the voices in her head that said, go do this. Now, without putting myself in a holy place, to me, you know, there is that, like, the muse strikes, where all of a sudden, you know, a melody comes to mind, or, you know, usually, personally for me, it'll be a title or an idea, and the idea is almost sung. I mean, there are songs that I've literally woken up from a, you know, dead sleep and just transcribed it before I forgot it. But, I mean, it was there. You know, so I'm sort of a believer and a romantic, and I sort of believe in that channeling. You know, the best songs come through me. You know, and I have the feeling they came as, you know, it's almost like the answer to a prayer, the demonstration for the faith or the process that you put into it.
I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that, because my next question was going to be what you thought it was that really came together to make that song as, just touching and powerful as it is.
Well, if I can put sort of pretty, attach that to your adjectives,
right.
Just for contrast, it came out of anger and frustration and being hurt and a tremendous sort of negative energy, which is I still find amusing. I had received a postcard. There was a lady that I had been involved with for a while, and the story is more graphic on my website, but she sort of just disappeared. I came home one night, calling, okay, I'm picking up Chinese, you want the kung pao and the egg rolls, you got it. And I just showed up with the Chinese food, and the person was gone. And just sort of mysteriously disappeared, like she was wiped off the face of the earth. And I knew there wasn't foul play involved. She sort of had a former history of gypsy spirit, and I went, oh, that gypsy thing. The gypsy gene kicked in. And I hadn't heard about her, or heard of her, nor had any of her friends for like years. And I was sort of at a day job, and I sort of got this postcard in my mailbox that said Sanibel. It was a picture of Sanibel, and on the back it just said, the nights are beautiful here. Wish you were here. And there was no phone number. There was no address. And, it just brought up all of this hurt and this kind of anger. And is this like she deliberately didn't put the address on because she was trying to have me make that move to try and hunt her down? Or did she just space out and forgot to put it down, or assumed I knew it? So it just emotionally it brought up a lot of these frustration and, these ugly side of the relationships and the breakup things. And I was really kind of more mad than even frustrated. And I sort of sat down and I had my guitar and I just wanted to express something. And I wanted to write one of those da-da-da-da-da, how can you do this, da-da-da-da, to me kind of songs. I was really like sitting there playing with a wrath.
Right.
And next thing I knew, it just sort of burnt out very shortly, and I started sort of finger-picking something, and this sort of little guitar riff, I was in an open tuning, and this guitar riff that I'd never played before or knew how to play just sort of came out, and I was gone. I was just off. And, all of a sudden, the essence of really just seeing that postcard and the idea of being, that island setting and the nicer part of being in love sort of came up. It reared its lovely head as opposed to the dragon that was trying to write the ugly blues, you done me wrong song. And, again, that was the Joan of Arc thing. And there was sort of intellectually that sort of James Taylor lighthearted, bittersweet thing sort of kicked in with one of my favorite books had been The Prophet. And the opening line of The Prophet is talking about he's on a cliff, and the people saying, "Don't leave us." And he says, "No, here my ship has come, and it's time for me to leave. But before I leave, I want to give you all these nice thoughts." And I just sort of went right into that. There's a ship and it sails a sea of light, enlightenment, on its way to me tonight, taking me home. So it's just basically I superimposed subconsciously The Prophet on there. And I'm also a big mythological fan, and the song wound up being about, basically it's also the Odyssey. It's Odysseus trying to get home to Penelope, and Penelope sitting there for 10 years saying, "No, I know he's coming. No, he's coming, and I'll unravel the tapestry every night and redo it in the morning, but I'm waiting for him. I know he'll return."
Okay. So you went through the experience of writing the song, and I'm wondering, once it was completed, did you kind of set it aside for a little bit? And then if you did, at one point did you begin thinking in terms of, from a more maybe pragmatic perspective, in terms of what it is that you wanted to do with the song? can you explain how that process all came about? And the reason why I ask is because this leads into a question I'm going to ask you in a little bit, which is the song ended up on like a demo tape that you had that you eventually gave to someone, and we'll get into that in a bit. But tell me how it went from you finishing the song to it ending up on this demo.
The song was finished, and it got finished very quickly. You know, it was just one of those things like it sort of wrote itself. Just needed maybe a little lyric buffing here and there, but, you know, it came down in one session. You know, I was just like I couldn't write it down as fast as the things were coming. And I would sing things into a tape recorder or something and just, you know, mumble and blah, 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 and, you know, hopefully get lucky. So I wound up doing a little recording for it, and the song itself was not. It just didn't make sense with anything that was on the charts. You know, it wasn't like, wow, I wrote this tune, it's going to be great. Everything at the time was maybe disco-y or you know, punk, or that sort of singer-songwriter thing had, in the Southern California, you know, mellow harmonies thing had sort of passed. So the artists that were established. You know, James Taylor wasn't going anywhere, but people weren't looking for the next James Taylor. So I just said, you know, it's just kind of in my catalog, and you know, this is one of these things. Again, it wrote me. I had to get this thing out, and I think it's very pretty, and I played it for a few people. They really liked it, but you know, it just didn't have any sort of commercial viability. So with a tune like that, I just sort of walk away. I say, I know it will eventually be demoed, but it just seems like the most important thing was for the song to be written for me or through me. So again, it's either it was a life message for me, or there's somebody out there that needs that message. If I can just walk away from Sanibel for 1 second, but it relates to that same, you know, kind of news theory. I was trying to get desperately out of the business. I had just hit a certain point, and I'd moved out here for a while, and I just had one of those big life crisis things where I had what I call like mother's prayers, where you're like on your knees in desperation, but you're also, you know, it's like you're pointing your finger up to the skies and say, "You do it, God. My kid got hit by that bus. Now you fix that." You know, where it's just like, you know, it wasn't of, "Oh, please help." It was just like, I need to know something different to do. If I'm supposed to do something different, I need a definite sign, because this is like breaking my heart and busting my bank account, and it's been so long, and it's just like I feel I can't bear this. The weight of doing this anymore. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I was literally just so down and desperate. I mean, I just lied there in bed. Like, you know, I'm like comatose. I'm too tired to pray or to cry. I was just like in the zone. And within minutes, a voice sang to me, "We are all God's chosen people in some great eternal plan, and we touch the heart of heaven when we help our fellow man. And if we're judged by our compassion in the great sweet by and by, there but for the grace of God go I." Mm-hmm. And it came loud and clear, every note, every word. You know, and then I kind of went, thanks. That's not what I was looking for a song. I was looking for like a way out. So, you know, I wound up, you know, demoing that song. And the song's always gotten a lot of great reactions. It really hasn't, you know, clicked. It always clicks with audiences and clicks with people. And, you know, I get letters and I get the handshakes after the show. "Oh, you know, that sort of touches me so much." And, you know, it hasn't hit the big 100, but it's one of those things I said, okay, I need that song. And again, I needed that song for me. That was like a personal answer to a personal prayer, you know, a metaphysical prayer. But when I do it in front of audiences, I say, you know, I'm just the vehicle for that. You know, there's people that whatever they were going through in their life, they needed that little bit of inspiration and humility, or whatever they get out of it. So that's always been something that's kind of magical, and that goes back to the Joan of Arc thing, something kind of very magical about the process. And that doesn't mean that you can't write, you know, just a goofy simple, plain, happy-go-lucky song either.
Okay. So you demoed the song, and you have an interesting story about how the song got to Graham Nash. You have one of those cool stories. Can you tell me how that happened?
Yeah. It was, and this is one of the things I found in my personal business, that anything that happened that was like a major turning point in my career was a total serendipity. It was like an accident. It was somebody that ran into somebody. It wasn't the doors that I was pounding on. It was somebody who ran into somebody who said, "Oh, I know this guy. You should call him." And then someone called me. And I ran into this guy, Alan McDougall. And Alan was worked at A&M Publishing, and I had a very good lady friend who worked there, and I knew him through that. And it's just I'd see him at a Christmas party every now and then, just a casual friend, Scottish guy. And he said to me, "Hey, my kid, do you play slide guitar?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "My kid wants to learn slide guitar. Hey, could you show him some stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Just bring him over." He said, "Okay." And he called me like the next day and said, "Look, it's okay if I'm dropping my kid off, for like a couple hours." And I said, "Sure." And he dropped his kid off, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going over to Graham Nash's house. Do you have any songs for him?" And he was Graham Nash's best friend. He was his best man at his wedding and each other's weddings and stuff. And I said, well, I don't know. And I just had Sanibel on a sample reel of a few things. So I gave him the cassette. I said, "Yeah, here." And he really thought nothing of it. Then I came home later on in the day. I left and I came back later that evening, and there was a message on my message machine, which dates the story, that said, "Hello, this is Graham Nash, and just calling to say we're going to both make a lot of money with Sanibel, on the island of Sanibel." And, I just thought like, whoa. So, just great moments in serendipity.
It's interesting that you mentioned just a few minutes ago about how you were at a point of just being exhausted by pursuing songwriting. So then this moment happens with Graham Nash calling you, leaving you a message telling you that he loves the song. But then what happened next was like 10 years of back and forth negotiation and uncertainty about when or if they were going to record the song. So can you tell me both, I'm kind of curious about that 10-year period, what it was like for you, and what it is that you learned through that experience from a business perspective. But I'm also curious about what you were doing songwriting-wise at the time as well, and how you were evolving as a songwriter with, did you just kind of keep on doing your thing and honing your craft while at the back of your mind this song just kept, kind of coming and going in your life?
Basically, the song, from the time that I got that phone message to the time the song was actually recorded, was 18 years. It was 10 years until I actually went down and did the session with them. I just sort of went about my business. Again, it was sort of, a real high, and I went like, wow, and Crosby, Stills, Nash, my heroes, and, the perfect song. And I've got a lot of, 3-part harmonies. The whole song is written around harmonies and acoustic guitars. This is like a dream come true. But then I went to call, and nobody returned my calls. And I found out who their manager was, and I spoke to the manager, and he was just sort of he was not being unprofessional, but he wasn't being professional. Like if you called up a David Geffen and they said, "Yeah, well, we want the song, and here we want to sign you a publishing thing, and it's that, and we're recording, and we're licensing," and he just was totally vague about, "Yeah, well, Graham wants the song." I said, "Okay, well, they're recording." "No, he's not recording. He's not well, they have any plans to do it? Well, no, they don't know what they're doing, but he'd like to have the song. And I was kind of like, well, and I'm waiting, like, is he offering me a publishing deal? Or is he offering, something? And the guy never told me what he wanted to do. He just said, well, Graham wants the song. And I said, well, Graham, does he just want to collect the song? He's a photographer. He collects photos. Does he just want to, like, nail the song, the cassette to the wall when Joni Mitchell comes over and point it out? What do you want to do with it? And I was totally, they said Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young are doing a reunion. They're going to record this song. They want to do it on this album. They're going into production in a month. I would have said, great, you can have publishing. I'd rather have 50% of a real inside run. But the guy never came up with any, offering me anything to do with it. So I was just like, well, I'm not uninterested in working with you guys. I'd love him to do it. But when you have something to do, by all means, give me a call. And then I wouldn't hear anything for like a year or two. Then I get a call back from a guy again, and he was saying, oh, look, Graham wants the song, but it's for a project, and it's like a real special project, but I can't talk about it. And I said, well, what's the project? He says, well, it's really secret, but it's going to be big. And I was kind of like, you don't get it. You're supposed to be getting me all hyped up on why I'm supposed to give this to you. Not asking me for something and saying, but what I'm going to do with it is a secret.
Well, and I'm going to interrupt you there because I'm curious, weren't you getting frustrated and at the point maybe thinking, like, screw this, I'll find somebody else to do this song?
Yeah, it wasn't even a screw it. I was kind of like laughing. I remember just sort of laughing my conversation, saying like, you seem to have this reversed. You're not getting with the program here. And I just the one thing I did know is what flakes these guys were with their own careers, and they're just together and they make up and they break up and they're gone. So I knew they were basically not guaranteed they're doing an album once a year and touring and then doing a single. I said they might have been broken up and been broken up for good. So, as much as the romanticism of them doing the song was, I had a very practical sense of, these guys, are not reliable amongst themselves. So, I never had, I was disappointed, but I never had my expectations so high about this being a completed thing, just by the nature of the beast.
So then it never really got to you to the point where it distracted you from writing other songs or pursuing other opportunities?
And again, even that song just came as that song, and it came from that emotional point, and I liked it. I thought it was a really special song. I still think it's, one of those little magic songs that I've been blessed to have come through me, and I'm very proud of. But, you can never take one song, even if you think, oh, this is going to be a big commercial smash, or, even when you hear something on the radio and it's a single, you can never say, hey, this is the thing that's going to put me through. Now, I did have, kind of a fantasy of, hey, if these guys get together or they do a reunion, and this could be a really big selling thing, and then this could be something that really cracks open the door for me, and it becomes a cash cow for me, and if it goes on a greatest hits album, you always have that thing. I came up with this stupid legend of Songwriter's Bridge, which is you can't take it anymore. You walk out to the edge of the Songwriter's Bridge in the middle of the night, and you're just about to kind of take a head dive. You're looking down at the little white caps, and just as you're about to leap, you hear this little pitter-patter of footsteps in the distance, and you hear a little voice calling out like, don't jump, you've got the new Justin Timberlake single, or Garth Brooks, or Madonna, or whomever is the act du jour.
Right.
And life, all of a sudden, that moment on Songwriter's Bridge, your whole life flip-flops.
Right.
Right. Just, poverty becomes abundance, and can't get a phone call return becomes people lining up to take you out to lunch. And, and I've seen both sides of that. So, there's something that's the legend of Songwriting Bridge that just sort of always keeps me going.
Well, and something similar happened, which happened next in this story, is that then you got a call to go down and actually record the song with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So first of all, tell me, when exactly did that happen? So you wrote the song in 1981, right? And then when did that recording session happen?
That was about 10 years into the waiting period. So again, I had been contacted, maybe twice, thrice from the manager, just kind of, hemming and hawing about something. And I just said, well, sounds great. My reply was always, hey, sounds great. Let me know when you're ready to do something. And I wasn't holding out for publishing or anything like that. But nor, as a business level, I didn't want to just sign something over and, the song was gone or the song's on hold or the song, maybe Graham does a little solo project somewhere, or when it might be something that I could use in another place. I didn't want to tie the song up for no particular reason, and I'd never give publishing away for no reason. And no writer should. If someone just says, hey, I can do something with your song, but I have to have publishing. If they say that right up front, it's adios. If you want to sign a publishing deal and you're getting paid, for, a salary, advances, whatever it is, then you're entering into a publishing deal and you're saying, I'm willing to take 50% of something and have somebody actively representing and putting me in with other writers and using their context. And, it's a trade-off that's worth considering. But anybody that just, I really think that's going to be the biggest thing on earth. It's going to be the new sliced bread, but I got to have publishing. They're just full of jive. Okay. So let's see, where was our question?
The recording session. You got the call out of the blue?
Yeah, I got the call. I was working on a screenplay. I kind of went, forget about music, for now, and working on a screenplay and typing away. And I got the phone call, and it's like, hello, is Denny there? And I went, speaking. Said, can I get... Oh, this is Graham Nash. Who played guitar on your demo of Sanibel? I said, well, I played and sang everything on the demo. Did one-man band thing. He said, can you get down here right away? He said, we had James Taylor in here, and he couldn't cut it on the acoustic guitar. And I went like, wow, can I get a copy of James Taylor not cutting it on my song? And I will just build a shrine with, incense and Buddhas and apples and oranges freshly delivered every day. So I said, okay. And it was a rare rainy day in L.A., and I just put on a little ball cap and drove down to the studio. And after, there's 10 years of this, make-believe thing in my mind, I said, I'm sitting here with Crosby, Stills, and Nash recording.
So what was that like from two different perspectives? One, as a songwriter, being in the same room with these legendary musicians who were collaborating with you to create this recording of this song. But then also, I'm curious, after the session, it must have kind of renewed your hope that this song was eventually going to end up on a CD somewhere.
Yeah, well, now I said, now I'm not talking to the manager. I'm talking to Graham Nash, and he said, getting down in the studio now, can you play on it? Here's some of the top session musicians, in town. And I said, no, this is the real deal. So now we're talking. And we weren't talking business at that point. There was no publishing, who gets what involved there. It was just, can you come on down and play this? We're in the studio now. We've been trying to record your song for a couple of days, and which, by the way, from a business point of view, they should never have done, because they had no, I could have had the song on hold or something, but, I was there. So, yeah, that was encouraging, and that was intimidating and exciting at the same time. But it's one of the things I didn't have time to think about it. I had to just get in my car and drive down. So I went down to the record plant, and working with them, this is one of those, be careful what you wish for. This was one of the greatest moments of my career and one of the greatest nightmares of my career. Just by the nature of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, they're This is nothing. I'm not telling any tales out of school. They all write books and talk about it all the time. They have an inner dynamics that is sort of very difficult. And Graham is St. Graham. He's the nicest, sweetest, most enlightened man you could want to meet. You walk into the room and it's like, the angels sing. Mm. And, he's legitimately, you could, shake hands with him. Hi, how are you? And he'll be going, where are you from? Oh, New York, we're in New York, Brooklyn. I have a cousin in Brooklyn. And, he's just, it's all about you and meeting you, and he's a people-loving guy. Crosby, I don't know where he was in his drug, ups and downs, but Crosby was always, I met him when he was in the Byrds and stuff too, and he's always been sort of, had that Crosby edge. And the Crosby edge, add drugs to that, and it was like maniacal. But he was, he was a reasonable guy, but, I went, hi, nice to meet you. And he would see you again, and he said, yeah. He said, okay, I want you to go in there and do the demo just the way you did. I want you to go in there and play it just the way you did the demo, or you'll blank it all up. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I'm getting marching orders do it my way or else. Right. So he just has that edge to him, and you go, oh, okay, fine. And Stills is Stills. Again, he's sort of one of the great white hopes for white blues guitar players, and his work, his writing and stuff I adored Buffalo Springfield and CSN. But I'd met him before, and I knew a lot of people who knew him. And he's a jerk. He's really a very difficult person, and he's one of these guys. As much talent as he has, I guess he has a big insecurity about it because he likes to cut other people down. And everybody's sarcastic with musicians and make fun of each other, but he has just an edge to it and a sort of an arrogance to it that makes people feel unwelcomed.
That brings up a question I'm kind of curious about then. So you have this mixture of personalities and dynamics, but then you have this, as you described it, this really pretty song. As a songwriter, was there a part of you, there was obviously a lot going on in your mind, right? When you were at the recording session, but was there ever a part of you that was these people, they're, as talented as they are, what if they completely, torture my song? Or, how could, can I trust these people? I understand that, as a songwriter, you have to look at it from a business perspective, and obviously these were legendary musicians, but I guess the best way to put it was there a part of you that didn't trust them with your song?
Well, let me put it to you this way, to use a Southern expression, this wasn't my first rodeo. So, okay. I know you can go in there and you can have a great song, and you can be in a band and you have a great song, and the song gets screwed up by the producers or the guys in the band are fighting it, and it doesn't come out the way you want. I've had sessions where everything comes out and it's just perfect. It's like the dream, just the way it sounded in my head, it came up sounding out. I've been on records that I didn't like that were hits. I've done records that were released I was incredibly proud of that just didn't do anything. It's like combat. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. All you can do is whatever you can do at that moment in time. So,
and is that also a good lesson for songwriters? Is basically to not have any attachments to outcomes?
Well, no. That sounds. If I said that, it would almost sound like a callousness, or I don't care. I mean, I cared. Boy, I cared from every bit of my fiber, but I wasn't going to buy into the emotional roller coaster of things.
Okay.
Okay. I said, look, my job here, and there are 4 producers here. The 3 of them are all producers, and they have an engineer that they've graduated to producer, and they have their drummer, Joe Vitale, that they use. So there's 5 people there that I have to please. And there's 3 songwriters there. And Graham wanted my song to be, substitute for one of his songs on the album. So he wasn't taking songs away from them. He was giving up one of his slots on the album from me. So I was, very grateful of that and very humbled by that. But I also said, these guys are all producing, so everything I do I worked as a session musician, and, you work with some producers that are great, and they let you go, and there's some producers that just drive you crazy, and they don't know what they want, and they just sort of beat you up and give you all the wrong cues. I'm used to just saying, we just have to get to the best of what we can get going in the room. And the goal is, is that moment where you're in the studio listening back on the big speakers to what you just did, and you say, yeah, that feels good. So, if everything was just all blown to hell, there's nothing I could do about it until it all blew up in my face. But, I was just going in there. And again, my marching orders was, here's some top session musicians, go out there and make it sound just like your demo. Mm-hmm. So, what could be a greater situation than your heroes telling me, we want to basically just overdub our voices on the music that you've made.
Yeah.
On your song. That's the greatest compliment imaginable. And plus here's these magic musicians, the guys that did all the Jackson Browns, Bob Glaub, and Greg Dorgy on keyboard. These guys have done all the classic California, singer-songwriter stuff. So, this was just a blessing. But the session had started off with, actually even before I went in there, I told Graham over the phone, hey, Graham, one thing, my guitar's in the shop getting a fret job. You have something down there? He said, hey, you've got all Stevens fucking guitars down there, and you can use whatever you want. I said, okay, great. So I went down there, and I went through all these fantastic Martins, and, picked out a nice pre-war D28 and told the guy, it was strung up just the way I liked them. I said, you don't have to do anything. And the roadie was on, Steven had called, and, the roadie's calling up to me, Steve wants to use any finger picks? And I said, hey, no, look, tell him I'm just using my fingers, no picks. I'm just playing little Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, light touch things. No problem at all. And then the guy listens and he says, okay, well, because Steven says if you screw up his guitars, he's going to kill you. So Elvis had not even entered the building, and I've, been threatened. And like I say, musicians can sit that and say it face to face when you know each other and you kid around. But as your introduction, that's not good. I was in there, I was wearing a ball cap that said Atlanta Bulldogs, which I bought because it was raining in Atlanta and I didn't have a hat. And it was, a rare rainy day in California, so I threw on the first hat that I grabbed. Stills comes walking in the door and just looks at my hat and goes, Atlanta Bulldogs, yeah, man, it's good. Get that hat out of my session. It's the Miami, blah, blah, blah. And just starts, doing a kidding around, but, that's his hello. That's his handshake. Right. Get that jive-ass hat out of my session. So I said, oh, brother, here we go. Welcome to, Stills' world. I was showing him the song, and I was, again, trying to incorporate all of them as much as I could into the project. So I gave him, I said, look, Stephen, I can show you. The song itself, it plays around, it's almost like Blackbird, where the acoustic guitar part is the song is very much built around the acoustic part. So I said, look, Stephen, I'm doing it in G tuning. I can show you how to play this because I'm just basically ripping off Joni Mitchell. To which he said, I taught Joni Mitchell everything she knew. She didn't know how to do anything until she met. Yeah, okay, great. So it's like nothing. You could say like, hey, cool cowboy boots, where do you get them? And he'd find something to come back at him. So, and then he started playing, we started playing the song, running it down, and it's a very sweet, gentle island breeze kind of tune. And he's blowing like blues licks over it. And, it's just so inapropos, and he's sort of playing, in the wrong notes, and and then he starts yelling at the engineer, he can't hear the stuff, his headphone mixes up, and he throws the headphones up against the wall and storms out. Mm-hmm. To which point I said, okay, maybe we can get something done here. Right. And, I worked with the musicians, and I was just sitting on a stool next to the drummer because I knew they'd have to redo the guitar parts. And we got the song down like in, a take, 2 takes. Just top-of-the-line session guys. Then I went back and I was putting on the guitar, and then I was going to overdub the guitar. And Stills came back in. He was in the control room, and I played the song halfway through, and then the engineer stopped. Wait a minute, I need one more for me. Okay, fine. Then I ran the thing the second time, got it beginning to end, top of my game, got the take, and I was doing the double. I got that done in, a take or so. So, we got like that master guitar part in a matter of minutes. And then Stills kind of chipped in on the talk back and said, like, lighten up when you play it. Because it really sounded, before when you're playing it, it sucked. It really sounded bad. Well, it sucked and it sounded hard because I was sitting on a stool next to the drummer, conducting the parts out for him. Of course I was playing louder. But I got the parts done. I did my part. I said, okay, this is great. And again, still had that, well, it's about time you did it right kind of attitude. And Greg Dorgay, the great piano player, was sitting at the piano, and I said, he's going to be the guy putting on synthesizer, and he's kind of the big band musical arranger. So I said, look, let me show you the voicings that I'm doing on acoustic guitar, so you can sort of translate that into whatever overdubs or stuff. You'll know what I'm doing, then you can choose to do it or do something totally different. And he said, okay, great. And I was playing the song out with him sitting on a stool, and Crosby and basically Crosby, Stills, and Nash all sort of wound up around the piano. And Graham was singing it, running it down for the key. And I said, this is great. And they had this, it was blue Georgia sky, where they cry, and there's this big, ooh, la, 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 3-part harmonies. And all of a sudden, they all hit their notes, just on the fly. And again, that was one of the great moments in my life. It was like, giving birth, watching birth. And I said, oh, man. And I'm here with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, my heroes, and they're doing my song perfectly. And I couldn't be having this moment without them, but they couldn't be having this magic moment without me either. Right. So it was just absolutely, just a magic moment. And that lasted about 10 seconds. Then in the middle of the second part, the second time around they're going to do that, Still stops singing, starts talking, and says, well, maybe I should sing this song. Maybe I could sing this one. And then Graham looks at him like, oh, no. Oh, Stephen, well, this is going to be one of my songs. And then Stephen tells Graham, well, then screw it. You don't even need me for anything. I'll just quit the blanking band. Mm. And at which point I had enough. And as soon as he said, well, I'll just quit the band, and I just shot right in with, I wouldn't do that if I were you, Stephen. And then everybody looked at me like ugly, and I said, they won't even have to change the logo. And they all sort of looked, their eyebrows kind of twitched up, and they went like, what the heck does that mean? Then it kind of clicked in one at a time. Oh, Crosby, Sarokin, and Nash. You can use the same T-shirts, the same logo. And then, Graham and everybody started getting a big laugh. And Stills kind of did one of those begrudgingly, things. Mm-hmm. So, the studio, again, it was such a dream come true, but just the nature of Stephen made it so, such an uphill scramble when everybody else is marching orders. It was just, Denny, here's the best players in town. Here's your song. Do exactly what you want to do with it. So it, wound up. It was done, and they thanked me, and they were going on to other stuff. And normally you'd want to maybe hang out a little, or listen to what else they were doing, or mix. I went like, no, I got to get out of here. To quote a Don Henley lyric, somebody's going to emergency, someone's going to jail. And I said, no, Stills is just, I've managed to use my rapier-like wit to kind of get emotionally a zing in there. But no, something's, he's just like pressing buttons, and these guys are used to it. I've had enough buttons. So I've got enough thumbprints in me from button pushing for the day. So I left, and it was supposed to be on the album, and I actually sort of signed some sort of paperwork or release for it, and it wound up not being on the album.
Right, and that's what I wanted to ask about. So that was 1991. Fast forward finally to 1999 when you got the call that it would be on their Looking Forward album. But again, I'm going to ask, what was that 8-year span like between the recording session and you finally getting that phone call? Again, what were you doing songwriting-wise, and what did you learn about the business?
I learned I think the most I learned about the business I learned when I was about 18. And I had a band and our hit record when I was about 18, the song Come On Down to My Boat Baby, Every Mother's Son. And it was like a number 2, number 3 record. And, I went through like kind of, I was a Beatle, I was on TV shows and hullabaloos and all these things and touring around at 18 and, kind of dropped out of college to be on the road. And I had something where I was, as a songwriter, it's funny, they just re-released the box set of the complete Every Mother's Son stuff. And I listened to it for the first time really in, a decade or more. And, listened to the stuff I did on the first album, which was really the first songs I had written, and then the stuff I did on the second album. And I kind of really felt like, here I'm kind of seeing Denny in this stuff. And not just the flaws and, the amateurism of Denny and the good intentions of Denny, but I'm starting to see the nature of who I am as a writer. There's a couple of tunes there I say, would still hold up today. I was starting to get it then. And, there's just a certain point that, I think I sort of shaped my character for better or worse as a writer. Now, it doesn't mean that the writing can't get better and better, and I hope I'm writing better songs tomorrow than I did yesterday. But, again, writing is a craft. It can be learned. You can teach people things. There's a lot of information. It's like being a good carpenter. How do you put things together right in a quality way? But there's an artistry that some people have with wood or metal or something that's not just about a cabinet or a desk or a table. There's that awe factor where you walk and say, wow, how did somebody think of that? Or how did somebody say that in such a simple way? It's like Paul Newman saying nothing with his eyes and a look just says more than, some other actor with all kinds of histrionics and props and things.
So then tell me about 1999, because actually a lot of things happened in that year in terms of the progress with this song. So I'm going to guess that after all of this experience, again, for the 8 years that passed between the recording and the CD finally coming out, that you just kind of, did your thing, right?
Yeah, I just went on doing, whatever type. Again, I was with Rick Nelson, the Stone Canyon Band. I wrote for Rick, and I was the band leader and guitar and the vocal arranger. And, we had a nice 7-year run, and we did 2 albums. So, I was involved in that California country rock kind of stuff, which I enjoyed and, had some success at. And, basically, I wasn't one of these kind of guys like, okay, disco is in, so now I'm writing disco songs. When they had everything at the Donna Summers beat, I had a tune I wrote called I Can't Lose You, and it had that, that pumping, 120 bass, boom, 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 boom. But the song itself was really sort of just about spiritual, I can't lose you, meaning it wasn't, like a Jesus God song, but, just my spiritual side. It's just like, it was almost like a disco prayer, but in the guise of a boy-girl song, I Can't Lose You. So it sounds like a boy-girl song, but I know I wrote that again from an internal place, which is some of the best songs when, they mean something to you, to me, and they mean something different to you, and they mean something different to someone else. So, my music, and, even today, you always have to try and evolve as a songwriter, saying, be aware of the production values. And, are people looking for story songs, or people looking for, meaningful songs, or are people looking for just, serial filler, Kellogg's Cornflake songs? Mm-hmm. So, I always put that into I tell people at songwriting seminars and stuff, they say, well, what should I listen to? I say, listen to the muse, listen to your heart, listen to the radio. Sometimes the muse just sends something special to you and, run with it. Don't worry about who's going to do it. Just, follow the song and follow your heart. Sometimes, you have a baby, you're heartbroken, you fall in love, and something comes out emotionally. Allow yourself to go to that place and, really write something very true and personal. And also listen to the radio and see what are people doing, what are the records sounding like? I think being a musician, to me, a musician, even though I played guitar before I was a songwriter, I started writing songs. I started playing guitar because I wanted to play songs. I wanted to play the Everly Brothers songs. I wanted to play Chuck Berry songs. So, to me, it's a very interconnected thing. One really feeds off and drives the other side. The player and the songwriter are constantly recycling back to each other or giving feedback to each other. So I'll listen to a radio and, the current state of music just to try and see what are the production values. What are the guitars sounding like? What are the mixes sounding like? Those things will shift. And if you can keep a good eye for that, the production value, that can help you place a song in a more strategic advantage place in terms of pitching it.
Well,
go ahead.
I wanted to ask you actually about pitching songs because, and again, going back to 1999, so the song was finally released. I'm wondering if you could talk about that time and that year. And then also on your website, you mentioned that the song's release opened up some doors for you. So talk about what it felt like to have the song finally released and then how that song has benefited you over the past 13 to 14 years.
Well, it made me some money, which is always a good benefit. And actually, the way I always had a strange karmic connection with Graham Nash, and I don't know why. And I always enjoyed the stuff he did with the Hollies. I was a big fan of that. I used to play Holly songs in the bands that I was in my live shows. But I ran into him coming out of an Every Mother's Son session. The guy comes up to me and says, like, hey, do you know where, Circle Studios are or whatever it was? And I said, yeah, it's right down there. I said, you're Graham Nash, aren't you? He said, oh, yes. And that was the night that he, left the Hollies, and he was going to talk to Stephen Stills or somebody in that studio. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of a pivotal night in his life. I was doing a soundtrack for a movie that I was doing in California, like a musical, and I was sort of like one of the monkeys thrown into this musical. It was never released. But I was working on the soundtrack with the Wrecking Crew, those Super Session guys, and a friend of mine said, hey, he was a Buffalo Springfield roadie, and he said, hey, Steven's cutting next door. Do you want to check it out? And I walked right into the recording studio when they said, okay, let's turn it all up. The first time Crosby, Stills, Nash ever heard Sweet Judy Blue Eyes all together with the electric guitar overdub. I was there the first time they heard the first playback blasting away at them. Wow. I just always had this kind of popped up in these magical little Graham moments, even though I really didn't know the guy.
Right.
So I finally get the phone call from him. Again, I haven't heard anything, and 8 years goes by, and it's Graham. It's like, hello, Denny, this is Graham Nash. And it's talking to me like, shh, don't tell anybody, like he's looking over his shoulder. And he starts going into this, there's going to be Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album. And they're working on it. But they always had a wonderful and weird thing with Neil, because Neil would work with them, and Neil will pick up and leave. And, with just goodbye. He'll leave a note on the door. He's gone. So he had come down to do, Stills went up to see Neil about some box set for Buffalo Springfield, and Stills was playing him some of the stuff they were working on. He said, hey, I'd like to play some guitar on that. Okay, fine. And he said, let's go. And they drove down. And he went and he played guitar on a song and went, hey, what else you got? Yeah, let's do that. And started hanging. He was like the man who came to dinner. He was just hanging out in the studio with him, and he wasn't leaving. And the other guys were kind of like, are we doing a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album? Because we're paying for this, and if we're not, it's great. We'd love to do Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album, but if we're not doing that, he's just kind of screwing, burning up our studio time. And, it's unproductive. So, everybody was Neil was going on as if it was going to be the album, but he wasn't committing to doing the album either. So Graham was just trying to get me, you know, to make sure that the song was on board. And he had the that I had of Sanibel, and they took home a work reference the day that I was in the studio doing the masters, and the tape did not. They lost the tape somewhere. They lost the masters. They just had a reference tape, and they spent like weeks in the studio with Pro Tools and stuff trying to get one of the choruses off. So because Neil loved the song, and he wanted to sing one of the verses, so kind of split it with Graham. And they spent a tremendous amount of time technically trying to do that, where I was like, well, why didn't you just call me up? I gave you I did the whole track for you in like about an hour. You could have flown me in, put me in a Holiday Inn, and we could have gotten this thing done again in an hour. Well, the magic was there in that mix that we had. Yeah, okay, whatever. So anyhow, Neil just fell in love with the song and just said, oh, I want this to be the last song on the album to kind of give everybody a little drift off into the sunset thing. So I said, hey, this is terrific. Neil loves it, and Graham wants it. But Graham was getting on little kitten paws because nobody wanted to push Neil into a commitment where he'd go like, no. It had to be Neil's idea. So it did wind up being it. And actually, I wound up getting the lion's share of the deal because they assumed after all these years that I was holding out on them. So, they really didn't come after publishing or anything like that. They just wanted the song. If they'd given me a good, honest deal a long time ago, I would have given them a lot more. But so, I basically just wore them down. So the song wound up coming out on the album, and that was a thrill. And again, that's one of those things. I have these mega fantasies of, no, this is like Songwriter's Bridge now. I'm going to buy Songwriter's Bridge, and build a San Francisco around it. I just saw like a Led Zeppelin reunion. I heard they were going on tour. Oh, even better. And, this is going to be, and all the hippies are going to come out to buy this, and this is going to be like, an awesome. This is going to ship gold and go platinum. And my song was one of the singles. Mm-hmm. I said, wow, this is just a gold boat floating towards me. And unfortunately, the album kind of charted at like 98 and then just fell off the charts. And their live tours were very successful, did very well, but the album got very mediocre reviews, and people just weren't buying that. But I still made some cash out of it, and still do. Just got another royalty check just the other day.
So besides the money, any other benefits that you think came of it? I guess I'm wondering. The reason why I ask again is it leads to my last question. People believe like that there's that everything happens in its own time, and a lot of people wouldn't have been as patient as you were, would have kind of held on to some sort of expectations or become possibly bitter. Or I think maybe after a certain amount of years, maybe the average person would just become neutral, right, and just stop caring. Whatever happens,
you get numb.
Right.
But to quote two of my favorite songwriters, there was something Tequila, Southern Rise. Some of the good times never come. You just get numb. So it's times you just get numb about things and say, let it be. It's just like your career is like a teenage kid that's just being, just a total jerk. And you say, hopefully they'll outgrow it and, whatever. Right. And it's like a girl that has that, oh, Mom, anytime you do. So you say, hopefully they'll outgrow it and there'll be better times. But, you're just stuck with whatever that situation is at the moment. And you just go through it. And to quote Stephen Stills, to say something in the very positive column, rejoice, rejoice, we have no choice. You just have to, it's the nature of the business. It's like being a soldier, but saying there's some things I don't like about this. And, sometimes they give me orders, and I think it's a stupid order, and I'm not going to do it. The industry and being a part of it, it's just this enormous sausage machine, but it's also a process, and you just have to go through everything the best you can, and again, I always find, the biggest things that ever happened, the nicest things were the biggest surprises. Getting with Rick Nelson, the Stone Candy Band, was a total surprise to me. But it was a metaphysical surprise. It's something I'd visualized. I had seen Rick Nelson and the Stone Candy Band on TV one night and said to my girlfriend, I'd like that. I should be doing that. She said, you want to be Rick Nelson? I said, no, I want to be that guy right next to him, playing a little acoustic guitar and and singing backgrounds. And the next day I got a phone call, Rick Nelson's band split. He needs somebody right now. Can you get down here right away? The same thing as the Graham Nash thing. So, I know, there's just a strange karma or these sort of, gods of fate when you're doing the stuff long enough, and you just have to really do the work, try and enjoy the work. There'll be constant frustrations, there'll be constant highs. But even when I'm overdubbing something in my home studio at night, and I just sit there and I listen to it, and I'm going to go to bed and say, one more time, let me listen one more time. Let me listen to one more. That moment kind of creation and something being there that wasn't there before is just, to quote my song, the magic of the music keeps us there.
So what are you doing these days?
These days, I'm still writing, and they're playing rounds. A lot of my energy is really focused around, I'm a guitar instructor, and I have a guitar instructional video called Lictionary, the Songwriter's Guide to Great Guitar, which I'm very proud of. And it's basically, I teach and do seminars trying to get people to really turn their guitar into a co-writer. And a lot of people are just sort of mediocre players, and they feel very insecure about it. And the guitar is just the greatest instrument in the world. And it can really sound like a whole band. It can sound like a drum. It can sound like a bass and a guitar and a piano and all sorts of great things. So I really just break down a lot of, licks and tricks. And a lot of the pro tricks aren't like the biggest, most difficult things they've ever learned. The pros have a shorthand. When musicians get to do a session, there's these little shorthand things that they do that sort of get a lot of bang for the buck. So I kind of teach, kind of guitar coaching and, hey, this is how to get that James Taylor thing. This is how to get that Chet Berry thing. This is how to get that Keith Richards thing. So the DVD has a lot of these just little bullet point sound bites and say, hey, that's really cool. And I can play that Keith Richards song, but more importantly, I can get into that Keith Richards groove and then write a song in that particular groove. So that sort of takes a lot of my time and attention. And I still play rounds all the time and do a little bit of session work. And, that fills up your day.
And so where can people find more information about the DVD and about you?
They can go to www.dennysarokin, SAROKIN.com. And I've got my website up there, and I've got some, I have my original demo of the song Sanibel, and a much more detailed where I can use some words that I guess we could have used the words on blogging, but I tried to keep them clean anyhow. But I have the whole Sanibel story on there, and I have a bunch of things from Rick Nelson tunes that we did together. And so it's a bunch of my songs throughout my career, and just about my guitar collection and information. I give Skype lessons and things like that too. If anybody wants to do that, or they're coming to town, they can just book a couple of hours, and it's sort of like like a one-on-one seminar. And I also have access, like about 4 or 5 of free guitar lessons, how to play like James Taylor, how to play like Chuck Berry, how to play like Chet Atkins. So they can get some guitar DVD samples on there, and some fun pictures throughout my career and that kind of good stuff. And anybody's willing to just email me at www.dennysarokin.com or info@lictionary, LICKTIONARY.com, and I'd be happy to talk to them or help them, or if they have any questions about stuff. I do song evaluations and song consulting for people too. I've done that for a long time with NSAI and Tennessee Songwriters and a bunch of people like that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all the details about this a really amazing and fascinating story.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank David, too, who I've just recently met, and I've downloaded his book. and I'm still waiting for my six-figure check to come in. But I figure I guess I have to read through the whole thing before that comes to me.
Right.
But that's
exactly.
And thank you. It's really been great talking to you, and I enjoy your show, your blog, and I intend to be listening to it. And God bless, and everybody out there, just keep playing, keep writing, and have some fun.
This is the musicmarketing.com podcast. Denny Sarokin. Wendy, great interview.
Thank you.
It's cool to hear the stories behind this song. This is kind of like the real behind the music.
Okay. Yeah, it's fascinating.
This is way behind. This is 18 years behind the music. Well, it is cool, and you know what I think is great about these songwriters is that they're out living and they're observing, and that's one of the things that makes them great songwriters. They're observers, and they're able to communicate that within their songs. And I think that Denny is a great example for really all listeners, everybody who has the dream of being in music, and it is to stick at it, keep doing what you're doing, and if something comes along and it works for you, great. But if it's not working, don't let that stop you continuing to move on. And he's done a lot in addition to this, and he's continuing to do a lot.
Exactly. Yep.
We talked a little bit about this, and I say we because you were right there every bit of the way when I wrote this book, Six Figure Musician, editing every single word, sometimes 7 or 8 times. And we talked about that in the book, Six Figure Musician, about tenacity and having impact. And I think this is how it's done. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but once you get it rolling, it's a really good thing to have, and it gets easier the longer you go.
That's true. Yeah. I think that's really what it's about. And he is a really good example of that, of sticking through it. And if you listen through the whole interview, there was at one point when he was just going to walk away from it, didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but was on the verge of walking away from it. But then, synchronicity kind of happened and renewed his spirit. He did stick with it. And I don't think he has any regrets. I never asked him that, but I'm going to assume he doesn't because he seems, to be, still doing his thing.
I think anybody who really cares and that's really putting blood, sweat, and tears into it has thought about giving up at one time or another. It's not that clear as this is my destiny and I'm going to go for it no matter what. Of course, you're going to have doubts because you're vulnerable. And I think songwriters are some of the most vulnerable people out there. It's one of the reasons they give us such great songs, because we can feel that vulnerability and relate to it. So sure, that's a completely normal reaction, and that's it's good to hear, because I think that sometimes we have people that we do interviews with, or I talk about them on the blog musicmarketing.com, where it just seems like it happens so easily for them. And the truth is, there's just like this song, there's always the backstory. Sometimes it's 18 years, and if you didn't know this story behind the song here that Denny just told, you just think that maybe even Graham Nash wrote that 15 minutes before the session, but he did not. So, Wendy, we're always looking for great people to interview for the podcast here. If you have some suggestions, contact me via Twitter. My username, David Hooper, all one word, lowercase, David Hooper, via Twitter. And Wendy, we got some great shows on deck. Next time, I will see you for episode number 5.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the musicmarketing.com podcast. If you have any questions or comments, email David and Wendy at musicmarketingpodcast@gmail.com. To listen to past shows and get even more music marketing advice, visit musicmarketing.com.